So hi, I'm Kim Cross, and I am so excited to be here. Before I get started, this was my home library. I used to live in Rossbridge, and I would come here and work. And I have to say, I live in Idaho now. The short story of where I'm from is Califlora, Bamaho. But this is probably my favorite library in the whole country, and I don't feel at home like I do here anywhere else, and so I'm so happy to be here. So we're both writers of thrillers, and mine is nonfiction. So I'm going to kind of talk about literary nonfiction, narrative nonfiction. Thank you for catching the misspelling in my title slide. That was a test, and you passed. I just redid my presentation overnight, so this is kind of fresh for me. So so I have a pop quiz. I blew it. What do these things have in common? And you got the answer. Me! So as a writer of meticulously researched and reported narrative nonfiction, I don't really kind of fit in a typical book category. In the bookstore, there's no shelf for narrative nonfiction, but really my genre is stories that are supposed to read like novels, page turners, all of the suspense and scenes and characters, but they are all based on reported fact-checkable facts. So someone comes behind me, if I can afford to pay them, and fact-checks everything that I put in the book. My books are all based on true stories about real people. Often these real people have gone through something really traumatic, and part of the whole process of writing these books involves a great deal of empathy and compassion and connecting with people and trying to be kind of a story midwife for their story. Usually I'm not in my books. They're all third person, but I'm very much there on the page, hopefully in voice. My books are based on meticulous reporting. This over here is I used to be a travel editor for Southern Living, and that's what 5 years of travel writing looks like. They're all indexed, and and then this was the most, but not all of the research for the Polly Klaas book. They also involve a lot of writing retreats. I'm a mom of a 16-year-old boy, and I also teach and cook and do wifely things. And so when I have to get my head in a big book, I often go on a writing retreat. And just 2 days ago, I was writing in this little cabin that is 10 square feet bigger than Thoreau's cabin. It is dry. It has no running water. It has a wood-burning stove, and I get to split wood to take breaks for my writing. And it allows me to really immerse myself in the process of writing. So I'm going to talk a lot about process today, because I geek out about process. And the process is really, really messy. As you can see here, one of the reasons I go on writing retreats is my husband likes a very tidy house. And I cannot write a book and be tidy. My brain just goes bleh, and my stuff does that. Over here I have a storyboard with crime scene photos and a floor plan of the house. And I've got crime scene photos over here. And then I've got a timeline over here, calendars, and I've got a map over here, and I've got notes and hourglasses. Do I have any runners in here? No runners? Does anyone know what a fartlek is? It's a funny word, and it's a Swedish word for a running interval where you spot a tree and then run to the tree and then you walk. So I do literary fartleks where I'm I'll write for 30 minutes and I turn my hourglass over and then I get a break. So that's what that is. Narrative nonfiction is a particularly difficult, I think, genre because you want it to read like fiction, but you're really limited to sticking with the facts. You want characters and scene and tension and drama, but you can't make anything up. So if there's dialogue in my book, it means that I have found a transcript, or it came from, a text, or someone posted on social media that they were thinking that, and that got into their head, even though they're not around to be interviewed anymore. And I think of fiction as kind of like this beautiful fresco, like the Sistine Chapel, where there's infinite capacity for detail, infinite capacity for different nuances and colors. And I think of nonfiction as more like a mosaic, where first you have to gather up all the little things, which are the facts, and then you've got to sort them, and then you have to meticulously sequence them into something that creates a bigger truth. There's one quote I once heard that said, from a fiction writer who said, well, if you want to read about facts, read nonfiction. If you want to read about truth, read fiction. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not fair, because I think if it's done really well, good nonfiction narrative nonfiction, which means story, can read like good fiction. So, these are my 3 books. Who here has read What Stands in a Storm? Hopefully a couple. Okay, so What Stands in a Storm 2015 is a narrative nonfiction account of the biggest tornado outbreak on record, which of course came through Alabama. It was 349 tornadoes over 3 days that touched down on 21 states from Texas to New York. And Alabama was probably the hardest hit state with 62 tornadoes in one day. Most people who live in Alabama remember this. I was living in Ross Bridge, James Hill, and I was hiding in my laundry room with my dog and my 4-year-old son and my husband, and we all had bike helmets on and a mattress, as you do. And I remember at one point, James Spann, we were watching, our power had gone out because the tornado that came through Tuscaloosa was heading toward us in Birmingham, and James Spann called out our neighborhood, and we're like, we could die, like in a few minutes. So crawled out of that. I was working as a travel editor for Southern Living at the time, and our editor said, like, we need to do something with this, and so we went out and tried to see what we could make of it. So that's What Stands in a Storm. I tell people, though, that this is not a book about tornadoes. It has tornadoes in it, but it's really a book about people who weather the unthinkable and lift each other up. It's about the beautiful things that come from our brokenness, and so much of it, you live through the storm through the point of view of these characters and the people trying to help them. First, the meteorologists trying to keep them safe, then the first responders trying to dig them out, then the community trying to lift them up. But it's really, I think at the heart of all my work is a story that is about the human condition and about how the things that tear our world apart reveal what holds us together. It started as a magazine piece, as some books do, for Southern Living. And one of the questions we asked, because at Southern Living doesn't really do bad news, right? Or news at all. And so we thought, well, what can we do that Southern Living readers are going to want to read 4 months from now, which is the soonest when you like turn a story in, it comes out 4 months later. What can we say that is going to mean anything? And so I asked the question, well, how do we cope? And specifically, how do we as Southerners cope? And we found 3 common themes. It was faith, was the first one. We turn to our faith to get us through the thing, and then after, we turn to our faith to make sense of the senseless. This is Pastor Wes. He was in that church when it fell. The only thing unbroken was that window. Food, of course, like when you can't do anything, like you're at a funeral, you're dealing with an emergency, a crisis, but we can feed people because people need to eat, you know. If we can't drag branches and cut boards, we can feed the people who are. And fellowship, which was my favorite theme, because everyone in Alabama who wasn't hit gave what they could. There were hair bows for Hackleburg. There was a photographer who donated portrait sessions to families whose memories were stolen by the wind. This blanket was a memory quilt with iron-on pictures depicting a girl's life from birth to graduation. And it was one of the last things that this girl right here owned because her house had burned in a fire. So she had kept this at her mother's house. Then her mother's house got hit by the tornado. It flew over 2 counties and landed in her yard. And it had just her first and middle name, not even her last name. And so this woman posted it on Facebook, on like a Facebook page to reunite possessions picked out of azaleas and with their owners. And I got to be there when they reunited. And so I took this picture. I was there. And it was such a beautiful moment because these 2 families never would have met. Flew over 2 counties, by the way. And yet it was a kind of a healing moment that made you remember, when bad things happen, often in the wake of those bad things, some beautiful things happen, and we ought to remember that. And then, of course, it's about James Spann, the best meteorologist in the country, the only one who has his own bobblehead doll, and James Spann cakes. So then my next book was about the Stall House. A lot of people don't know about this book. It is a beautiful, it's like half coffee table book with a lot of photos and about 50,000 words of text. And it's really the story of a blue-collar family with a white-collar dream. So the people who recognize this photo, it's one of Time Magazine's 100 most famous photographs of all time. It is the Stall House, Case Study House 22 in Los Angeles in the Hollywood Hills. And Julie Schulman took it, and it kind of embodies a whole era of post-World War II. If you know anyone who is into mid-century modern architecture, this is a book for them. I won't talk too much about it, but I will show you just a quick book trailer that gives you a sense of it.
Architecture is a transformative experience and can be portals to parts of our soul.
And this is by far, if not the most iconic house in LA.
Even though it's probably the most famous house in the world, this is someone's home.
My parents, Buck and Carlotta, had the house built in 1959, finished construction in 1960.
Our life revolved around that pool. You know, that was the hub of our childhood.
The anxiety of Dad losing his job.
We were told that we didn't have weeks or months to move out. We had to move out in days.
It housed a real family and all the real life struggles that a lot of couples face. He only had one income, they had kids, but they created this.
Well, don't you think it's really kind of defined Los Angeles? This is the kind of architecture that put LA on the map. When you walk through those doors for the first time, it takes your breath away in a way you could never have imagined. It's a terrific LA story.
All right, so that came out 2 years ago. And then the book that, that just came out in October is In Light of All Darkness. Now, who remembers Polly Klaas, the Polly Klaas Kidnapping? Wow, that's a lot of you. Okay, so for those of you who don't, 1993, Petaluma, California, a little town north of San Francisco, 12-year-old Polly Klaas was kidnapped from her bedroom during a sleepover with two friends by a stranger who walked into her house with a knife, told the girls to get on the floor, bound her two friends, gagged them, and then took Polly away. And what followed was one of the biggest manhunts in FBI history at the time. Here is, so 2020 did a special. I'll just let them summarize it.
Polly Klaas vanished from her home in Petaluma, California on October 1st, 1993. For the 30th anniversary of her disappearance, Kim Cross sat down and told the story of the investigation from the inside for her book, In Light of All Darkness.
I am the daughter-in-law of Eddie Fryer, the FBI case agent in charge of the Polly Klaas investigation. We do not gather as a family and not talk about Polly. It's like part of our family DNA.
So is that what inspired the book?
I realized that I could get access because of my relationship to people who would not talk to another journalist. About an hour after Polly was reported missing, a couple of deputies responded to a trespassing call on Pythian Road. This was a woman's driveway in wine country, and the driveway is really, really steep and curved.
That particular evening, it was a full moon, I remember, and it was cold.
Dana Jaffe was a single mother who worked as a chef at one of Sonoma's celebrated restaurants, and she had just come home from working at the restaurant, and she had a 12-year-old little girl, and her babysitter had left, and on the way out of the driveway, she encountered a stranger, and he was in a white Pinto, and it was stuck in a ditch on the driveway.
I very fear some scary character, somebody who looked like Charles Manson, as the babysitter described it.
And she kind of slowly pulls up, and this guy comes around and to her driver's side.
She had her door locked, but she sort of cracked her window, and he came over and stuck his fingers in the crack of the window and was saying, "Get out of the car, you need to help me."
I think she cracked it this far, and she just rolled it right back up and took off. It frightened her.
So she drove out and called you?
The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was aware that we were in a vulnerable situation.
And you felt vulnerable?
Well, no one had any business being up there at midnight.
right? Most of it's on Hulu. So one of the themes that tie all my books together, besides being a really bad way to market yourself as an author, by building an audience with one kind of book and then completely doing something else, is that my stories really choose me. Often that I almost feel like I get kind of a calling to tell a story, and sometimes I don't even really want to do it, and sometimes it's a fit. For example, What Stands in a Storm largely came out of reader letters and the response to the magazine piece. It got some awards and stuff, but it was really the reader letters that got to me in my heart, and they all said, like, me too. I was in a flood or a hurricane, and I saw the same thing happen in my neighborhood. And they said, this made me proud to be Southern. And this is the first time I've cried in 20 years of reading Southern Living. And I realized stories matter beyond just the magazine piece, beyond just the people it's about. And so I looked around and I realized that there was no... there was The Perfect Storm about a nor'easter. There was Eric Larson's book about the hurricane. But there wasn't that kind of literary book about a tornado, and so I sought to write that book. The Stall House kind of interestingly came on the heels of a really, really horrible exploitation. This is the first time I've publicly talked about this. I can't tell you exactly what the book was, but I was hired to write a book, let's say by kind of a celebrity. And I put everything in my life on hold. I cleared out my freelance pipeline. I took 6 months away from my son to report a really, really, really hard book. And I wrote the book and I revised 2/3 of it. And then I was told that I was fired for reasons that weren't explained to me, and that my contract allowed them to take my work and give it to another writer to do with as they wished. And that was when I was moving to Idaho and carrying 2 mortgages. And it was one of the hardest things I've been through. I thought it was like a concussion, almost. My brain kind of broke. I went through 2 years of depression. I couldn't write really well. I didn't know if I would ever be able to write. It was horrible. And as I landed in Boise, Idaho, I was approached by Sherry and Bruce Stahl, who wanted a ghostwriter, or not even a ghostwriter, it's called a collaborator when your name goes on the cover, to write a book that they'd been trying to get written about this house that their parents built that had been widely known by the architecture community, but they hadn't really told their parents' story, which is that they really played a large part in the design of the house. And they told me that they had contracted a guy who was kind of a scam artist, who said, yeah, I can write you a book and do you a documentary, and you won't even pay for it. I'll get investors. And I'm like, this isn't how it works. And after a year, he had nothing to show for his work and the money he had spent, so they fired him. Well, he sued them and libeled their family, and in fighting and countersuing, they lost like everything, except the house. But it was really horrible. And then their younger brother, who had brought this horrible person into the family, committed suicide. Yeah, and I realized, oh my God, I stopped feeling, or I felt a lot less sorry for myself. And I thought, if I write their book, like I have the skills to do it, because I told them, like, I'm never doing this again. Sorry, I'll help you find someone, but I'm never doing this again. Then I realized, like, if I write this book, maybe it'll help me get beyond my thing. And it did. We learned to trust each other. In the same kind of weird way the universe works, on the 5th anniversary of the tornado in Tuscaloosa, I thought that I would be doing some press. I thought people would be calling and wanting to do interviews, and not one phone call. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I drove to Tuscaloosa to just spend the day there, trying to, remember. And I went to the house. 31 Beverly Heights was the center of kind of my book, and three college students died there. And right about the time that I was going there, I had some flowers to put by their memorial trees. Chief Williamson, the fire chief in Tuscaloosa, who I'd been terrified to reach out to initially because I thought he would think I was an ambulance chaser, he became like a really good source, helped me fact check the book, and then became a friend. He just called me and said, hey, I was thinking about you today. And I said, oh, I'm going to the house. Do you want to come with me? And he said, yeah, sure. So we're standing there talking, and all of a sudden this car pulls up, and we thought that it was someone there to pay respects. And we looked up at the woman and said, oh, how did you know them? And she awkwardly says, well, actually, I'm from LA. I'm here for work, and I am part of a book club that's reading this book about the tornado, so I thought I'd come here. And I totally dorkily said, I wrote that. It's me. It's my book. And then I'm like, do you want me to Skype with your book club tonight? I'm not doing anything. And she said, sure. So I give my little presentation about the tornado book to her book club. They're all in LA. And then they're like, well, what are you working on next? And I was like, well, who remembers the Polly Klaas case? And they're all like, yeah, we do. And one of them says, well, I know the jury foreman. Do you want his number? Yeah, and the jury foreman not only agreed to speak with me, he sent me a binder that had been given to him by the judge of every article that they were admonished not to read, and perfectly Xeroxed with all the dates, and and he just sent it to me, and that was really a gift because there's a hole in the Internet archives in the 1990s. Should you ever choose to do research, so. The other reason I wrote this book, the main reason, is that my father-in-law, Eddie Fryer Sr., is the FBI case agent who solved the case. This was his case. And I've been married to Eddie Jr. for, at least 15 years we've been married. So, yeah, we've been married for 20. Anyway, almost 15 years before I ever thought about writing it as a book. Even though Eddie Sr., it's like part of our family DNA. We don't gather as a family and not talk about it. Eddie has been teaching it for 30 years to classes of new investigators. It's still that relevant. And so Eddie Jr. said, you might want to think about doing that as your book. And I literally felt taken aback, like, this is not my kind of story. Like, it ends badly. I need something redemptive at the end. It needs to have some great, meaningful thing and not just be about a murder of a child. So then I did my homework, and it turns out that this case transformed the way the FBI does business, the way the FBI investigates crimes. There were a lot of investigative firsts in the book. It was the first use of fluorescent powder, an alternate light source. It was the first big case that the FBI evidence response teams worked on. It used to be they would send a forensic expert out from DC to a major case, and then the day or two it took them to get to the crime scene, trace evidence would disappear. Well, this was the formation of little, mini SWAT teams, regionally based, that could get there in hours. And they were tested and proven in this case. So there are a number of others. So a lot of the book is actually about the investigation and the tools. So there's here's how a polygraph works. Here's how, alternate light source and fluorescent powder was tested and adopted by the FBI. Here's what happens at the lab in DC. So if you're kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I can read this book, know that a lot of it is really goes into the history and the science. Like, this is how the SWAT team program formed. Because of my relationship with Eddie, I got access to people who would never talk to another journalist. I realized that I am the only person who could have written this book because I had the skills and I had the access. And it was that right there is the reason I wrote it, because it was a very hard and uncomfortable book for me to write. So here, these are, that's Tony Maxwell, who lifted the print from Polly's bed frame, the latent print. That's him in the field. That's my father-in-law. These two guys are evidence response team members of the FBI's very first evidence response team. That's Vale Bello, the Petaluma PD detective who was the original partner. And then that's Dana Jaffe, who you saw in the film. She, in 30 years, only gave 2 interviews. And she talked to me, actually because I sent her What Stands in a Storm, and she read it and said, okay, I see what you do. Another kind of crazy coincidence. So I couldn't find the confession tape, and I knew I had to get that. I knew it was out there. The current DA would not release it to Eddie Sr., even though he was the case agent. And I found it because my sister-in-law, so my husband's brother's wife, at her wedding, I was at her wedding, we were talking about the case, as we do in our family at the wedding, and I said, I just can't find the confession tape. And she said, I've seen a copy. I said, you're kidding. Her journalism professor at a city college in Sonoma had a copy that was given to her by one of the other investigators who had passed away, but he had given her a copy. He was teaching criminal justice. And so I got a copy, and then this is interesting. So Larry Taylor is one of the 2 agents in the room as they're doing the confession interview. Larry hadn't seen this in 30 years. I couldn't find Larry. I spent years looking for Larry, couldn't find him. Larry Taylor, it's such a common name, and FBI agents are really good at hiding themselves. And Tony had agreed to speak with me, and when he agreed, he started becoming my fixer and finding people and convincing them to talk. I said, Tony, I can't find Larry. He's like, let me see what I can do. He finds Larry living 20 minutes away from me in Boise. And Larry says, yeah, Tony, I'll talk to her, but only if you're there. So Tony gets on a plane in New Mexico, buys his own ticket, flies to Idaho, picks Larry up, comes to my house, and we're here in my living room watching the confession tape, where they do basically the, they tell me what's going on. So this is Tony back in 1993 at Polly's house, fingerprinting. This is the palm print, the latent print he lifted from her bedroom, which led to the major break in the case. That's where it was lifted. These are actual crime scene photos. That's the match from the FBI. DA Greg Jacobs is a good friend of my father-in-law, and he basically gave me unrestricted access to all of his files, loaded up 10 boxes of, banker boxes of files into my car, and was like, just bring them back when you're done. And he also I could just pick up my phone and call him at any moment of the day and just say, Greg, I have another question. More crime scene photos, and I don't think until I shared these with 2020, these have ever been shown publicly. And there's a lot more, but I'm just gonna show you just a few. This is one of the FBI lab photos that shows how ligatures from 3 crime scenes were matched up like a puzzle. And this was from the trial where it shows how all of the evidence, links all of the crime scenes. I want to talk just briefly about the process. It's messy, as I said. This is actually the start of the book proposal. So in fiction, you write the whole book, and then you find an agent, you kind of work on it with your agent, then your agent sends it out to editors. With nonfiction, you write a book proposal, which is like a 50-page document that's kind of like a business pitch. Here's the market, here's how I will market it, here's who's gonna read it, here's how it's different from what's out there. And then you have a deadline, and then you have to meet the deadline. And this is me basically mapping out scenes, color-coded on the ground. This is most, but not all, of the research that went into this particular book. From start to end, it was about 7 years, but not fully solid 7 years, because I actually pitched the book and it almost sold for a really good deal, but the deal fell through. Then I set it aside and worked on what I call the traumatic book injury. And then I just kind of trusted, it's not, sometimes no doesn't mean no, it means not right now. And I just had this instinct that it's not the right time, and the book will let me know when it's ready, and it did. And when it was ready, it was like, it's time. But I had more than 350 interviews with 50 people who worked on the case, 25 FBI agents who almost never talked to journalists, 25 detectives and cops. I had court transcripts, 12,000 pages, 6,000 of which I read multiple times, newspaper clippings, most of which were not in a digital archive and clipped and stored by sources and given to me, then I had to scan them. And then I had about a year to write it, and it was quite hard. It's another kind of, that's actually that's the bad book, but that's another writing retreat, what that looks like. This is from a timeline that I created for Storm, where I had time-stamped primary sources. So I transcribed James Spann's entire wall-to-wall coverage on TV, which had the clock by it. And that formed the basis where I interspersed it with other time-stamped information, like shots of the radar screen, texts from Danielle, texts and Facebook messages. So I was able to get in the heads of people who were not around to be interviewed because they posted what they were thinking on social media, and I could tell you exactly when they were thinking it. So when Danielle says, oh my God, look at that thing on the TV, I know what's on the TV because she said she was watching James Spann, and I know what was on the TV at that very moment. So it's all very, very accurate. Nothing's made up. While I was working on Storm, my husband lost his job, and the funny thing about an advance is it doesn't get paid out in advance. It's like they divide it into 4 and pay you 18 months apart, and then you give your agent 50% and then take 30% away from taxes. So I had to write 50 other stories and half of another book that I don't even put on my resume. I think it's like Christmas at Southern Living, and that was interesting. Writing, this is the fantasy, the Carrie Bradshaw fantasy from Sex and the City, where you're just like, da, 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 and this is the reality. It's messy. This is an actual selfie that I took on writing retreat where I think I took it at 3 a.m. or something, and I had been writing since 7 a.m., and I had been writing through tears and nausea because it was that hard. This was sort of a stage shot where someone wanted to come take a picture of me in my natural habitat, and so that's kind of what it looks like. And this was a writing retreat that I took at Hemingway's house in Ketchum. They have a basement that they let writers stay in. I just think that's cool. So to get it done, I had to write 2,000 words a day, which is a lot. And then the cost of it, sorry about that, that was for a friend, but the week before my book events, I had like back-to-back book launch events in Boise and in Sonoma, and I also had, I coached a mountain bike team, and it was this weekend of the state championships, and so that's why I'm like dressed I'm literally in my team jersey, because I was just gonna go, I woke up and I thought I had COVID, but I also had like chest pressure and chest pain, and I went to the urgent care and they sent me to the hospital, to the ER, where they were like, we're keeping you overnight, we think you're having a heart attack. I think that I had internalized so much stress, and there was kind of weird, creepy stuff going on in the background with conspiracy theorists and weird stuff, and that was kind of my pre-book launch party in the hospital. But the benefits are huge. This is one of the many, there's at least 3 or 4 storm shelters built because of what stands in the storm. It's taught in at least 4 states in high schools and colleges, including UC Riverside, the freshman comp class, which is kind of cool because for extra credit they write letters to the families of the characters in Storm, letters of empathy, and for them that's kind of hard, and I don't know, I think it's a cool thing. And then this right here, Stories Can Save Lives. This is Katie Romanek. So I kind of hate to spoil. Should I spoil the end of the book or not? Should I say? No? Okay, well, you'll meet Katie at somewhere in the book, but the stories can save lives. And then finally, I try to end my presentations with, like, thank you for coming. Here's how you can support a writer, not just me, but any writer, like read, buy books. We love libraries. Check them out, and then buy the book as a gift for a friend. I have a friend who's like, I've loaned your book to 8 people, and I'm like, thanks. Love you, Sophia. Write a review on Goodreads or Amazon, especially Goodreads. That really helps. I think other readers look at that, editors look at it. By buying a book and doing reviews, that's what editors and publishers look at when we pitch a book and want to sell another one. So that's why book sales matter. I've never gotten a royalty check. I probably never will. But Storm has sold 20,000 copies, and I'm only halfway to earning a royalty. So I'm not saying this so that you'll help me make money. I'm hoping one day my child will get money from it. I don't know. But it's more because it helps me sell the next book. If you tell a teacher, I love talking to classes, I'll Skype into a class because I love talking to kids. I also teach. I teach for Harvard Extension School, the part of Harvard you don't have to apply for. But I love teaching workshops and whatnot. And, hiring us as speakers and workshop teachers, it is such a relief from writing, because writing is such a solitary, agonizing experience that being able to talk about writing is so easy and fun. So, if you need a speaker or a workshop teacher, hire a writer. Take a writing workshop and sign up for their e-newsletter. A lot of times we don't have, my publisher has spent $0 so far marketing or sending me places to do bookshop. I did it all by myself or with help from friends. My Sonoma book launch was a partnership between the Polly Klaas Foundation and a bookstore there, and friends who let me sleep on their couches and who fed me. And I think my publisher's gonna reimburse my gas money. But coming here, it's all because of the Hoover Library and the Capote thing. They rented my car, so literally I have a budget of almost $0 to market the book. So spreading the word by telling book clubs or, I don't know, just any way you can help. It really does help us, and it also lets us know that someone's listening, and that's really good. So that is it. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Do I just close my laptop? Okay. Oops.
All right. Can y'all hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, it's my turn, and I guess they'll be setting it up in a minute, so I'm just gonna thank you for that presentation. It was really good, and hearing even though she writes narrative nonfiction and I write totally fiction, it's great seeing the similarities in your mess that you had was way cleaner than my mess. You just don't even, I couldn't even fake a picture for everyone to see, but you are absolutely right that it is not like Carrie Bradshaw. It is a huge undertaking, and it is even a lot of research, even at the fiction level. But I'll talk about that. I will talk about basically my journey to publishing so you can kind of see where I was and how I ended up here, right in this spot right here with you all. And thank you for getting tickets and coming out, and you guys look great. I can actually see you, and things like that. So I'm Yasmin Angoe, and I write, well, I guess these are going to be action thrillers, spy espionage thrillerish, but anything thriller, I'm your girl. And let's, oops. Yes, it worked. Okay, so this is sort of starting with my journey, right? So I am Ghanaian American. So my parents, or first generation Ghanaian American, my parents immigrated here from Ghana back in the 70s because they wanted to come and go to school, which is what a lot of immigrants do, right? So they came, they attended Howard University, they met and had me. And my mom needed to finish school, so then they sent me back to Ghana with my grandma, and I stayed with her for a couple of years while they finished out what my mom did, and my father, he got to working because he had a kid to raise eventually. And I stayed with my grandmother and then returned back to the States when my mother had graduated and felt like she was able to take care of me and things like that. So that was in Northern Virginia, which is where I was born and raised, in Alexandria and then Woodbridge, if anybody has been. All right, okay. That's the DMV. Okay, so for all of my life, I'll tell you that I always felt like I lived in two different worlds. I had my Ghanaian world, where my mom was very, she had friends. Everybody was very, a big Ghanaian community. Didn't have many friends over to the house because I didn't know how they were gonna kind of take being in with my, Ghanaian parent, and that they're very American. And then when I'm at school, very American. I want to do everything with my American friends, and I felt like that was so cool to be an American. Mom, leave me alone when I go home. I don't want to eat rice again and all this other stuff. Please, can we have McDonald's? And I was begging for all of those things, and I didn't know now, and you'll see what I mean, but what I had when I had it, right? So growing up all that time, my parents split up, and I became like a latchkey kid. Y'all remember that term? So yes, so I was a latchkey kid when my mom was at work, and she had a couple of jobs to take care of me and herself. Then I'd have to come home and be home by myself until she came home. Sometimes over the weekend, I would go with her to her second job, where she was a caregiver for an elderly lady, and I would hang out with her and the elderly lady. So I was always around, grown-ups, old people, or whatever. Sorry, at that time. Now I'm, older, so I wouldn't, but at that time, that's what I was thinking. The lady would be crocheting and things like that, and I'd be sitting next to her, not crocheting. But I would have a book, because books were my gateway to other worlds. Yeah, I was very lonely because I was always by myself until I was 12 and my dad had remarried and had other kids. So it was always babysitters or me by myself and then the old lady. So that was, my childhood. So books were like my best friend, my babysitter, my sibling. They were my everything. And I enjoyed so much how they made me feel when I would be able to leap into those worlds and live those lives that the characters were living, and just be totally immersed in that world. And so I started to think to myself, I really want to create something like that for others. I want to try to write this story and make it so engaging and so compelling that when somebody reads it, they are also totally absorbed in that story. And so this was about maybe middle school that I wrote my first book. It was, of course, it's a kid's book. And it was a fantasy. It was about woodland creatures who were fighting against the humans to keep their woods around because the humans wanted to destroy it and build something. It was like a take off of the Berenstain Bears. Do y'all remember that? Yes. Yes. So it was like the Berenstain Bears 2.0 and all these other woodland creatures fighting against the humans to save their woods and stuff like that. And I wrote that story. I still have that story. It was on loose leaf paper with blue Bic pen. I still write with a blue Bic pen to this day because that is my favorite pen. And all my writer friends they tease me because it's such a cheap pen, but I'm like, but you can't, like, this pen is my ride or die. I love it and everything like that. And so that's why I always carry one or two with me. But anyway, so I wrote the story, and I really enjoyed how I felt being able to write the story. It was very cathartic. It made me feel good about myself. And I was just like, I would love to be a writer. I wrote all through middle school, high school, and out of high school, I'm thinking to myself, but how does one become a writer? And at that time, the path to publishing was not very clear. It was before social media. It was before, we had computers then, but my computer, had the black screen with the green print on it and all this other stuff. And I'm like, how does one even, become an author? All these authors like Harper Lee and, reading Nancy Drew and all of those books, and I just don't know how they became one. So, and then also, because my parents are immigrants, when they come here, the thing that they know is you have to make money. So your job has to be something that you're getting a paycheck every other week. It has to be something tangible, and you're getting, so it's an accountant, a doctor, something, a lawyer, something that I can see that you're making this money. What is this creative thing that you're doing? And so so I didn't even feel comfortable with saying to Mom, I want to be a writer, because she's going to be like, oh, but what is that? I don't understand what this writer thing is, okay? So that's Evelyn, and so I'm like, I'm not even going to talk to Evelyn about that because I don't want to hear that. So I'm going to go to college and I'm going to, try my hand at a regular job. And I went through some, degrees or whatever. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and then I was like, you know what? If I can't be a writer right now, then I'm going to go and I'm going to teach it. So I got my English degree and then my master's in literacy and things like that. My certification in education. And then by that time, I was married, just freshly married and things, and my husband at that time was in the military. And so I wrote my first women's fiction book. And, I enjoyed that. That was a little take off of my college life or whatever. And I tried to sell that or to get an agent for that, and that was during the time of snail mail, so we would have to send the whole entire manuscript, snail mail, and a self-addressed stamped envelope so that when they rejected it, they use your envelope to send it back to you to tell you that they rejected you. And so, so that's what I did, and I got rejections and things, and there's nothing worse than seeing your own stamp on your rejection. Let me just tell you, okay? So we had our first child, and then he was getting ready to go to deployment. So I realized, I need to put that away, my writing, because I have to raise my child, and I have to support us and make us mentally prepared for his deployment. And so that was his deployment to Iraq. So he was gone, and it was just me and our first, and we, moved to Kentucky. That's where I started to teach English and English in high school English and things like that. And I loved teaching the students because it gave me an opportunity to talk about the thing that I love, which is reading, and then to try to teach them the thing that I also love, which is writing, and get them so involved in this whole thing of being a writer and finding their voice and finding stories that they love themselves. Because it's one thing, my favorite thing to teach is Shakespeare, right? And I love Shakespeare. I could talk about Shakespeare all the time, but they don't love it so much. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about Othello, but we're also going to go to the media center and let's find you a book. Now, if I was back in the classroom, graphic novels, all those things, the world is their oyster in terms of the types of books that they can read. But anything that they wanted to read, I was open to that. And I was like, as long as you're reading, as long as you're finding these other worlds to jump into. And so those are the things that we went through all that. We went through a few deployments and things like that. And then we moved to South Carolina. And South Carolina was where there was just huge life changes, right? And so things didn't work out. So it was me, and by that time we had another child. So the three of us, I decided, we're going to stay and we're going to make a new world here in this place. And we didn't know anybody. So I was like, I don't know anybody, and as an adult, it's really hard to make new friends as an adult. How am I gonna make new friends? What am I gonna do? Like, all my family is still back in Northern Virginia or in Ghana. That's really far, and I have no money to go there and things like that. So like, but we're gonna make it because golly gee, bad, I am not going to move back to Northern Virginia with my mother, okay? Not after 11 years, I can't do it. So I'm like, I gotta make, I gotta make it work here. The thing so that's like many years that I have detoured from writing. During that time, I really didn't write a lot. I didn't write at all, to be honest. And I always felt unsettled. When I started thinking about the character from my book, because characters always come first to me, and you might hear this from authors that they like talk to me in my head. Please, that doesn't make me sound crazy, I hope. But like, they really do. They're always talking. They're always kind of whispering like their story. Their story kind of unfolds, right? In my head, I'm always thinking about story and the character. How is this character going to be? What is this character going to do in any particular story? And so that's how Nina Knight, the protagonist of my the first book, her name is Knight, started to come to play. I knew that I wanted to write about someone who was different. Now remember, I'm an English teacher, and I'm supposed to be sweet, and I'm supposed to be, innocent, and I'm supposed to like only Shakespeare and all this other stuff. But I really love shooting up and killing things, and I love, thrillers, and I just love, just this big, huge concepts and blowing things up, and oh my gosh, how are they gonna get the bad guys? And I like delving into the bad guy and stuff like that. I love thrillers so much. One of my favorite shows is Mission Impossible, okay? Tom Cruise and Ethan Hunt is his character. My married name at that time was Hunt. My kid is a boy. Guess what I named him? I kid you not, he's Ethan Hunt. And so that's how much I love thrillers. And Tom Cruise, if anybody knows him, let him know. I named my child after him, okay? And my child actually is proud of it. He'll go around, he's in grad school now, and he'll tell people, my mom named me after Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt, and all this other stuff. So he really thinks he's cool. But so that's how much I love thrillers. And at that time that I was starting to think about this, I was like, I want a protagonist who is unlike everyone that we usually see. She's the one who is doing the saving. She's not being saved. She is the one who is taking care of business. She's gone through some things. She's finding all these things out about herself, but she's also killing people because she's an assassin. And so I charged myself with, if she's going to be an assassin, well, the reader, how am I going to make the reader like her? Now, I don't particularly go with my character has to be likable. She doesn't have to be likable, but you got to respect her and understand why she's doing the things that she's doing. So I charged myself with the task of, how are you going to make this person relatable to the reader, who I hope is not a killer, okay? If you are, don't tell me, okay? But how do they relate? What are the things that they can connect with? So I'm thinking, and also during that time, I like to say that even though the books are not about me, I've not done any of those things. Like, Nina likes to jump and she likes to run, and she's very physical, she fights and things like that. She exercises. I am allergic to exercise, okay? So I don't do that. That's not me. So she's very much not like me, but some of the things that I was going through at that time, my father also had suffered some strokes, was diagnosed with dementia, so his health was declining, his memory was fading. So I'm dealing with that and trying to raise the kids, trying to come up in this new place where we know nobody, and trying to remind myself that I said that I was going to stay here even though I really want to run back home. But all those things are things that you'll find in the book because there's found family. How do we find the people that are the people we choose to be in our circle, the people we choose to trust? How do we refill wells after, hurt and after, whatever else goes on in our life and we're being survivors and things like that? So those are things that she covers in here because she goes through some things. And when you pick up the book, because I know that you're going to pick up Kim and my books back in there, I better see you do it. If you don't, I'm going to send Nina after you, okay? But when you read her book, Her Name is Night, it is not an easy read, but it is a read that is going to, and I can tell you this because it was so hard to write the book. It was not easy for me. I had to take lots of breaks, and I had to ask myself, self, is this really like the story that you really want to tell? Like it's kind of, but I said, but I have to be true to her. I want to show how she survives. I want to show how she thrives and how she makes this thing different. So my question, remember, I charged myself with, how am I going to make the reader relate to her? How am I going to make the reader feel for her, who is an assassin who's supposed to go out and kill people? And that is, I want you to see how she became that assassin. So the book is told in dual timelines. And to move that along, I sat down really and wrote the book in 2019 with the intention of 2020, at the top of 2020, I'm going to query it out to agents. I'm going to get a book deal because I felt this is the book. It's going to blow up. It's going to be all this wonderful stuff. People are going to love it. They're going to understand Nina, and they're going to also want to be assassins and stuff like that. So 2020 came, and January 2nd, I started sending out, it's no more snail mail, no more self-addressed stamped envelopes, thank God, right? So you just send an email to all these, agents, and you say, here's the sample, here's my pitch, or whatever, and they, will email you back or ignore you. A lot of them ignore you if the slush pile is too much, and they let you know if they want to read more or if it's not for them. Well, I had nearly 100 it's not for me's. And getting those emails, after working, I'm still teaching, I'm still trying to raise the kids. I make them go to bed exactly at 8 o'clock because I need my time to write. Every minute that I had free, I was writing in between, taking care of them, trying to take care of myself, and working, right? Taking care of students and dealing with all of those things. And every email, sometimes it got so bad that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even check my email because I can't take another rejection. I started to doubt myself. Self, is this really what you want to do? Maybe your English teacher in high school, Miss Adler, she lied to you. So I was so mad at Miss Adler because she told me I was good, and clearly all these people are telling me that I'm not so good because they don't want to take me on. So I sent it. I was about to quit, literally about to quit, and one of my writer friends said, would you just apply for this scholarship? Well, not scholarship, it was a grant with the Sisters in Crime, which is a crime writing organization of which I'm a member now and on the board and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know, but I did it anyway and submitted. Right before I found out the results for that, I get an email from an agent who says, Yasmin, how about we jump on a call and next week? And I'm like, oh my God, now they want to talk to me and then, reject me on the phone. Why can't she just send me an email? Why does she want to talk to me? What does she want? I can't take this, right? So we get on the call and she says, I really love your book and I want to represent you. And I'm like, are you serious right now? And she says, yes, and so I have, she says, just let me know, think about it. And so I wanted to tell her yes right then, right? But you got to be cool because it's like dating and you can't call the guy first, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait the 2 weeks and pretend to think about it. And during those 2 weeks, I get an email, and the email says, you're a winner. And when you see that, it's spam. So I almost put it to spam, but then it said, Sisters in Crime in there. And I'm like, but wait. I look at it, and there it is. Congratulations. I am the 2020 winner of the Eleanor Taylor Bland Award of Emerging Writers of Colors. So I got an agent offering representation 1 week. The next week, I I find out that I win this book or this award, and I'm like, hot dog! And I'm doing the praise dance and everything because I am so excited that I have won this award, and this person says that they won after nearly 100 rejections, remember, and my self-esteem is like down in the dumps and everything, and I cannot believe this. So I get all that, and it's great. My agent eventually pushes my book out to editors by August so that was in May when I found out. By August, she sends my polished manuscript to editors and everything like that, and she timed it at the same time that they announced that I was the winner of that year. And within that week, we started getting calls from editors saying, they want to talk about like a possible book deal. And I was like, say what? I'm turning around and dancing, because I could not believe it. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? After all these no's, it's a yes, yes, and a yes, you know what I mean? And I don't know what to do with myself. And mind you, I haven't told anybody, not my new husband, not my kids, not Evelyn. Nobody knows that I have been writing this story, that I have an agent, and now a book deal and all this other stuff. Because I just didn't want to fail and have to explain it. You know what I mean? So I kept that to myself. And even when I got the win, I didn't want to share it for a while. Let me just be honest, okay? I didn't tell that to the other people, the people this morning. Okay, so the sharing was not caring at that time, all right? So long story short, going through all this, because I only have like 10 minutes so that we can have, question and answers. When the book came out, or even before the book came out, I got my deal from my book from Thomas & Mercer, and then the following week, so everything happens, remember, it's been 20 years that it took me to finally get to this place, and then everything is happening back to back. Then we find out that there are some production companies that are interested in optioning it to make it a TV series. So that's what you see up there is my deadline article saying that my series adaptation has been picked up. So now they want to make my book into some TV shows. And I'm cussing up a storm, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. By that time, I had to tell my husband because, because I guess he got to know, because he's going to wonder, because remember, this is during COVID, right? This is all in 2020. So COVID was a horrible, sad year, but it was also a damn great year, okay? And so while we were having meetings with these producers, it had to be on Zoom. And my husband was working from home at that time. He is a principal, right? So I know he's gonna ask me, who are all these people that you're missing? So I had to tell him, Lady in Yellow, I had to tell him, okay? And he was like, what? You've been doing what? And I'm just like, listen, this is what it is right now. And he was like, okay. And so he just kind of went with the flow, but he really wasn't sure what was going on. But whatever. So I have the deal. I have a blurb from my good friend David Baldacci, who was so kind to read it and blurb it. Best book of the year. Okay, I was nominated for an Anthony Award and People's Choice Fiction finalist with Virginia. Over here is my niece Hudson, who found my book in a library in Woodbridge. And so I said, I'm going to put her on this thing just so that you see how proud. She goes to the library, she looks for me. And I'm like, that's my niece, okay? That's Tater Tot. My book was translated to German, and so like all these different accolades after 20 years of a detour, right? A dream deferred. And finally, I get to, see my books, that's my second one, and all of these things. And so that is my path to publishing. I'm so proud of it. But I'm also still thinking about those nearly 100 rejections that almost stopped my whole flow. And, sometimes it's hard to receive. People say they really love the book. They especially really love Nina and her journey. And you'll see when you meet her. They really, really get invested in the villain because I love to write a good villain that makes you really like, oh my gosh, I want to strangle him, but I want to also kiss him because he's so cute. Because let me show you. So those are the 3 books. The book covers are fierce because my publisher, like, I'm not good with all that. My publisher, I said, you do what you need. And so she found like these really eye-popping covers and stuff like that. Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, I grew up watching black and whites because of my stepmother. And Ginger Rogers was one of my favorites because she had that saying, and it can go both ways, but she does everything that Fred Astaire can do, but backwards and in a dress or heels, depending on, right? And I'm like, that's my character, because look at all these guys that she has been compared to, but she does it better because she wears dresses or not, depending on how she feels, but she's a woman, and she's about saving herself and doing all these wonderful things that nobody has ever expected her to do. And of course, you know, I had to put my baby Tom Cruise over there, down there, right now. All right, Tom, okay. All right, so that's what we do. Now, my research, I do research. I do a lot of research, more research than actually goes in, because I want to be as authentic as possible. So that's me. I'm in a bomb suit, and the bomb suit is, you know, really wearing me, because that thing was really heavy, and it's too big for me. I don't meet the height requirement, because apparently you got to be tall. My villain, I envision Idris Elba. If we know some Idris, clapping, yes, indeedy. That's why, because my villain in the first book, I write him as a beautiful monster. And he's literally a beautiful man, but he has, you know, his insides are just not quite. And so that is Idris. If he ever, I hope if somebody knows him, just let him know that he can play Paul. And then my go-to for Nina is just somebody that I envisioned as writing, because I always have to kind of see who it is that I'm writing about, is Yetere Badaki, I think is how you pronounce her name. And so that's, to me, how Nina looks, though she can be whoever it is that they decide to put on the screen. This is me in my writing process. I'm all excited. When I actually sit down, I'm like, what the hell am I thinking? And then me rethinking my life's choices. So this is how I am every day when I'm sitting down like this, mostly crying, right? Because I'm just like, why did I, and you can attest to it, right? Like, why did we choose to write? It's really hard, and it is very solitary. But when you get people to email you and say, oh my gosh, I hate Paul with a passion, I wish you had eviscerated him, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I want you to think. Or, oh my gosh, I cried at the end. I can't believe blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. That's what I wanted to. I want tears. I want anger. I want you to get all excited. I want you to try to do what I do when I try to mimic the actions. And I'm a method writer. So like the scenes that I write in there for action and stuff like that, I actually try to act them out. And my husband will walk by and he'll see me trying to do some things. And he's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I'm working. Because I am. All right? Thank you. Yeah.
So we want to hear your questions.
Yeah,
we love questions.
You can turn that off. Oh, yes.
What are y'all thinking?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
What are we thinking?
What are we thinking?
What are we thinking? I don't know. We're writing.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And I'll say that before I got the deal, before any of this, when I was writing, it was really writing with joy, and like there was nobody who was expecting things. When you get, you know, a deal on your book proposal or anything like that, then that means everybody is expecting something from you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh no, people like want me to do more. And I was writing like a book a year. So 21, 22, 23, and then this next one that's coming out is coming out in August of this year. And so it's a lot, because it's a lot of time from your family.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time from even your self-care, and you're in these worlds, you're in realistic worlds that you have to make fictional, which is a huge feat. And I'm in fictional worlds that I have to create it from scratch, right? And it's a lot to get yourself, I could see how actors can get really invested in their characters, because it's a lot to pull yourself out of that world and be able to be present.
It's a cognitive load, I'd say. You know, when I was writing, I couldn't cook. So I was making like meals out of like packaged shakes because I just like couldn't even cook. My husband ordered one of those box meal things, so like, you know, the recipes as the shopping's done, because I literally like couldn't do much. Do you get postpartum depression after a book?
I do, because I'm like, oh, the baby is here, and like now I'm sad, especially now that the trilogy has like ended. I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do? I'm not in this world of Nina anymore. But it also is refreshing to have a new book, a standalone, which is what the fourth one is, that is fresh with new characters, and to see if, you know, readers will enjoy those characters and be as invested in those characters as they are in the characters of Nina.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go through a sort of, the book comes out and you're like, I should be so happy, but I just want to like go in bed. And
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
it's
so
weird.
true.
There's like almost a depression that happens and lingers for a little while. Even, and then, you know, people are talking and I just make other, do you read your comments? Do you read reviews and comments?
No.
I deputize a friend to read them.
Remember, I got nearly 100 rejections. I'm not reading a daggone thing anymore.
Yeah.
No,
It does
thank
take
you.
a lot of, like, this is testament to tenacity, because I do think that, you know, one of the skills that's underrated in this is tenacity and being able to take rejection and criticism, to take the criticism in a way that hopefully makes something better, but also to take rejection in a way that's like, okay, well, I'm going to choose not to believe what you say because it would be, you know, devastating. Right?
I believed it, though.
Yeah. But you kept going, though. Why'd you keep going?
Only because I got that agent. Because she came right at the time that I was about to quit. So she came right on time.
Yeah.
And you said, when you were talking, something like not, the book wasn't like right then.
Yeah,
but-
sometimes no doesn't mean no, it means not right now.
Yes, that exactly. And so, you know, I had to realize that that was my not right now. All of those no's were my not right nows.
Right.
And I mean, even a year later, do you know that I got an email from a agent still rejecting me? And
Really?
I said, I nearly sent her my book deal so that she could see I don't need your rejection. I just ignored it.
So here's
But
what you do. You put on your signature a picture of your book and like something award. And so when it goes back, you can say like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not accepting rejections right now.
I love that.
And then you can see your book and the little award. And you're thank you so much, sincerely.
I love that. Okay, all right. I'm not accepting a rejection.
I'm so
right
glad
now.
we're talking about the rejection and failure, because I do think that, you know, from the outside, especially in social media, it all looks like glory and roses, and there's so much failure. I mean, so I have 3 books that I can tell you about, and then I have the bad book, but then there was like another collaboration where I got a huge book deal for this person I can't name, female TV person, and I wrote her proposal, got the book deal, we were going to be in at 50-50, and then she decided after we got the book deal that she was going to do all her own interviews. And I was like, you're not a journalist. Are you going to record them? She's like, well, I hadn't thought about that. And I was like, I can't put my name on something where you don't let me do what I'm good at. And then I found out that she was maybe hiding something, and so I walked away from a 6-figure book deal, because I was like, I can't put my name on that.
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
there's, you know, my first book didn't get, you know, I wrote a first book when I was in grad school, and that I decided like was not the right time, not the right first book. So like there's so much work that gets thrown away or to the cutting room floor or put on the back burner before, you know, the success happens. And I think that people don't really understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and even after being, you know, getting your deal, when you're having to deal with like editors and you, and I mean, I will honestly tell y'all, like when I get my edits back, and sometimes there have been like maybe 366 comments from exactly, right? And I'm like, what did I really get in? Like, and it's hard, you know, for anybody. Rejection is one thing, but to go through 400 and something pages of 366, and that number, because that just happened like 2 weeks ago. And so it's really fresh, you know, that wound is fresh. And to go through all of those pages and to have to like address every single thing that they're asking, you can like read the person's feelings and thoughts, and you're like, oh my God, they hate this book, you know, this is how I'm feeling. probably more sensitive than what they think they're just writing it, but like it really makes you, and luckily being a teacher and going through like those critiques and teaching students how to accept feedback and how to deal with feedback without lashing out, take a breath. That's what's helped me as an author, because I have sat on some things. I will cuss and then I'll erase what I wrote and say, thank you,
My dad gave me, my late father gave me one of the best pieces of advice. So my dad was my first editor. He was a technical writer and a scientist, and he started editing me when I was in 3rd grade on my science project, and I cried. And but he said, kiddo, at some point I realized pretty young when I was in high school I wanted to be a writer. He said, kiddo, if you want to be a writer, you need a callus on your psyche an inch thick.
Whew. You're dropping bombs. I need that. Callus on your psyche, and I'm not accepting rejections right now. I like that. Okay.
But it's true. You have to do that, and it's hard, and also it's complicated because something on page 362 might need to be fixed on page like 17, right? And you have to be able to get this whole thing in your head, but also like you have to zoom in and zoom out constantly. How do you do that? How do you I'm obsessed with systems. And how, and process. How do you like zoom out and remember the whole thing, but also zoom in and look at like a sentence or a detail? How do you maintain both kinds of distance with your manuscript?
You mean after I cuss up a storm?
Right.
And storm off, because
right.
I do have to go through a process of being angry and then come with, and so how do I do that? I sit down and I remind myself of how long it took me to get there, and how now, when my kids who are in college and stuff are saying that they can't do something, it's too hard or whatever, we have 5 minutes, I'm like, do I need to tell you my story again? No, Mom, you don't need to tell us your story. This is how they are, right? So they don't want to hear all that. So that's what I do.
Right. Do we have any other questions? We have 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, this is kind of quiet. Okay, I see one here and one here. So we're going to start over here and then, yes.
This is not a question, but for those of you who have, Kim is very modest. I just want you to know that her nonfiction narratives read like any page turn you would buy. They're wonderful books.
Thank you, sweet Anne.
Yes.
This is my friend Anne and neighbor. Question, thank you, Anne.
But she tells the truth. She tells the truth.
We had a question. Yes.
What do you think of the contention that Polly Klaas's killer, that was just random, that he stumbled into her house on that night? Do you have any reason to think he had pre-selected?
Oh, yes. I will repeat the question. The question is, what do I think about the contention that Polly Klaas's kidnapper just randomly stumbled in that night? So, the investigators have. The evidence suggests that he did sort of stalk her, that he saw her, he had been seen in a park across the street from her house, or catty corner to her house, in the weeks before that, and when he came into the house, he said, "Who lives here?" which indicated that he was looking for, there were 3 girls, and he said, there are too many people here. Why are there so many people? And they said, well, it's a sleepover. And then he said, who lives here? The girls had been playing dress up, and it was Halloween coming up, and so they had, they'd put makeup on her to make her look dead, which is kind of creepy. She had wiped it off, but they looked different. They were playing kind of dress up a little bit. And so he said, who lives here? And she said, I live here. And he said, I want you. And so it's pretty much believed that he targeted her. He's been repeatedly asked, why her? And he hasn't, ever given a reason. And he just, I don't know, man, I don't know. So... But yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So both of you write about things that are pretty intense. So at the end of your writing day, what do you do to bring yourself back into your world that you live in and leave that one?
So the question is, we both write about intense stuff. At the end of an intense day of writing, what do we do to bring ourselves into normal world?
What do you do?
I mountain bike. And I try to do something that involves getting back in my body. And my side hustle is I'm a mountain bike instructor, and part of it is to as a freelancer, I'm constantly feeling, the need to make money, and this way I can pay myself to be away from my desk. And then to heal from this book, I just signed up for tap dancing lesson. Because you can't really think about anything when you're trying to tap dance.
That's funny. That's funny.
Tap dancing as an adult, I guarantee you that's correct.
Right.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
What do? I actually fold the laundry that I've ignored for probably weeks and weeks and weeks. I clean the house because I too don't cook, or I cook very little, so my husband is starving by that time, and so I might make a meal and like really put some clothes away because we're living out of laundry baskets.
Yeah, I got really unhealthy though. Like I think I was drinking too much, and I was just, I wasn't exercising like normal, and it really I gained
you're
weight.
allergic to? No, I'm just kidding. Just me.
I mean, it was really unhealthy. It was bad for my mental and physical health more than any other book. So I'm trying to turn over a new leaf in my next book's about fishing. So yeah, we have one more. Yes. Oh, you guys have to arm wrestle.
Mine will be quick.
Okay.
The Stall House, is that where Harry Bosch lived?
Oh my gosh. Sorry, that's my son. Harry Bosch, no, it's not. A lot of people think it is. It's been in at least a dozen movies. Why Do Fools Fall in Love? The one with Tim Allen and the aliens. Help me out here. Galaxy Quest, right? It was in the pilot for Columbo. It's been in a lot of movies and about 1,200, articles. It's really a famous house.
Wow, that's
so
cool.
yeah. If you look it up, you'll be like, oh, that's okay. Okay, one more. Yes.
Question is for you. When you said you stopped for a long time writing and then you started back, what got you where you just couldn't ignore it anymore, or what got you writing back?
Depression. Yeah, I mean, depression and really having to, I just needed to find something that made me happy again. And I had to remember that was the thing that made me happy. And then also, after losing my dad, that's one person who's not able to tell me about my culture. And that's something that I forgot to go back to. Remember when I'm trying to be a kid and I was, really shunning my culture because I wanted to be so American. But when he passed, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I really should have embraced my Ghanaian heritage. My dad is gone. There's only one more storyteller, which is my mom. And so I need to really embrace that. And that's one of the main reasons why I made Nina to be, Ghanaian, so that when you read, you're seeing Ghanaians, Africans in a different light, and being in a more strong and more position of power, right? Which is something stereotypically that we don't see. So I just wanted to flip some stereotypes on how women are seen, awesome. How people who are non-American are seen, things like that. So yeah, that was a great question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.